First love, selfies with a best friend, the thrill of adult life, these and much more are what high school seniors experience. Each of them has their ups and downs, but for two teenage girls, everything suddenly went downhill when a criminal walked through the open doors of the dormitory. Help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The action of today's case takes place in South Africa, a country with a long and complex history. The nature of South Africa is beautiful and amazing. It has deserts, savannas, plateaus, mountain ranges, and a multitude of wild animals. In the course of historical events, South Africa was divided into provinces. Its distinctive feature is racial, ethnic, and religious diversity. Today's events unfold in the Northwest Province in a tiny town called Stella, where most of the population is engaged in livestock farming. There are fewer than 1,000 residents there, and 70% are light-skinned Christians who speak the local dialect. This is a small community with one bar, one primary school, and one high school. For entertainment, there's the annual cattle fair, which attracts many tourists. The rest of the time, Stella is a quiet, cozy town. People don't lock their doors, and fences are meant to keep livestock in or simply create the appearance of security. Like any similar small place, it has its problems, but for the most part, it's a wonderful place to live and raise children, where all the residents know each other. Today's story is about two girls, Marna and Charnel, two best friends who attended the local school. Marna Engelbrecht was born in 2001 and grew up not far from Stella in the town of Vryburg on her parents' farm. The girl's father was involved in drilling wells for water, and her mother was a kindergarten teacher. Marna was a very home-loving girl, shy, quiet, and she loved animals very much. She studied diligently at school, and after classes, she ran to the farm where she played with dogs, cared for cows and sheep, and bottle-fed newborn goats. Marna also had her own horse. The schoolgirl was into horseback riding and spent all her free time outdoors. In the future, the girl planned to become a veterinarian and was already picking up injured animals and nursing them back to health on her farm. Upon reaching her teenage years, Marna entered the high school located in Stella, which was a boarding school. 5 days a week, boys and girls attended classes and stayed in two separate dormitories, and on weekends, they went home. The girls lived in a 2-story building with shared bathrooms and multi-person bedrooms. The entire grounds were fenced with a low fence and gates that were locked at night. There was plenty to do in their free time. The campus had good sports facilities and tennis courts. Thematic parties, holidays, and competitions were regularly held. All students wore uniforms and looked very respectable. The main goal of this boarding school was to distract children from phones and computers and make them communicate more with each other, as well as focus on sports and talent development. In March 2018, 32 boys and 39 girls lived in the dormitories on the campus grounds. There were restrictions, but boys and girls could gather in their dormitories and spend leisure time together. Before this, Marna was shy, quiet, a bit withdrawn, and often overlooked. But in her first year of high school, she became a star of her class in the literal sense. Every quarter, the top students in the class received gold, silver, or bronze medals for their achievements, the so-called Order of the Star. Marna received the Bronze Award several times for success in natural sciences and mathematics. It was during this period that the girl got a best friend, Charnel Huff. Charnel was the complete opposite of Marna, but as they say, opposites attract. A bright blonde with green eyes and an attractive smile, she was very sociable. In fact, the girls had been friends since kindergarten, but lost contact in elementary school. Meeting again at Stella High School, they resumed their communication and became practically inseparable. The students even moved into the same room to be closer to each other. Every weekend, the friends visited each other's homes. Together with the rest of the family, they went hiking, rode horses, fished, played netball, just hung out on the farm, and recorded numerous videos for social media. Charnel Huff was born on March 8, 2001, and was an only child in the family. She grew up on her father's farm in Delarayville. The girl's parents divorced, so Charnel spent most of her time with her father and visited her mom in Coaster. When her father remarried, the girl got a brother 7 years younger than her, whom she adored and took everywhere with her. Charnel's father was very warm toward his daughter's friend Marna and considered her part of the family. Stella's school was 45 minutes' drive from his farm, and all 5 days the man missed his girls incredibly. But his daughter Charnel liked being independent. She dreamed of becoming a professional photographer, although due to her bright appearance, she was predicted a career as a photo model, believing she shouldn't hide her beauty behind the camera lens. Charnel was athletic, completely non-confrontational, and approached everything she did with childlike enthusiasm. Marna, on the other hand, was quiet, sweet, but at the same time quite stubborn. However, the more time they spent together, the more they adopted some of each other's character traits. In March 2017, 16-year-old Charnel met 17-year-old Xander Bailsma. Tall, handsome, a bit mysterious rugby player immediately caught the girl's eye. She very soon became the most important person on earth to him. Xander was ready for anything for his girlfriend and treated her like a queen. Charnel's father and stepmother also liked the guy. He was polite, hard-working, but the most important quality, he genuinely loved their daughter. Ironically, Xander turned out to be Marna's third cousin, and now this trio became inseparable. Xander was very close to his mom, Marcia. His parents divorced when their son was in elementary school. This fact brought him very close to Charnel. When Xander met his first love, he was finishing his senior year. At that time, he liked fishing and hunting. But when Charnel appeared on the horizon, all hobbies faded into the background. The lovers talked a lot about their families and even made plans for the future. About 6 months into the relationship, the honeymoon period ended. The rose-colored clouds began to dissipate little by little, and Charnel started noticing her boyfriend's negative traits. Xander was possessive and didn't want to share his girlfriend with anyone else. He began isolating her even from her closest people. Marna was confused as to why Charnel stopped inviting her over on weekends. It turned out the reason was her boyfriend. Xander checked his girlfriend's cell phone to see who she was communicating with on social media, who she was calling. Serious trust issues appeared in their relationship. Charnel confessed to Marna that although she loved Xander, she wasn't sure if they had a future together. After much thought, the girl made the difficult decision to break up. She felt that these relationships and constant control were starting to weigh on her, which she told her enamored boyfriend. Not expecting such a turn, Xander was very upset. He asked for forgiveness and said that these were his first serious relationship, so maybe he was behaving wrong. The guy promised to change and do everything to make Charnel happy with him. The teenage romance would resume and then end over minor quarrels. Xander couldn't change in a second and continued to be jealous of everyone. Every time Charnel decided the relationship was toxic and tried to end it, the boyfriend apologized, and they both sincerely rejoiced at the reconciliation. When you're so young and emotions are boiling inside, it's really hard to make a final decision on what's right. On one hand, you don't want to lose the person you love. On the other, any little thing becomes a reason to break up. Meanwhile, the date of the big ceremony for seniors was approaching, the prom. And Xander invited his girlfriend to accompany him to this event. Of course, for Charnel, it was an exciting event, because she herself was still far from graduation. The girl went to her mom in Coaster and chose the most beautiful dress she could find in the store. She was preparing for the festive evening just like Cinderella once dressed for the ball, but Xander quickly ruined her uplifted mood by saying he had already picked a dress for her. It was his ceremony, and Charnel had no choice but to agree with her boyfriend's choice. Xander asked his girlfriend to come to him in her usual clothes, without makeup or jewelry, and Charnel agreed. Nevertheless, the evening turned out magical anyway. The boyfriend's mom did the girl's hair and light makeup. The black lace dress turned out to be really beautiful and suited Charnel very well, and their couple looked very impressive at the ceremony. In any case, it's worth remembering that for most girls, preparing for an event, choosing an outfit, hairstyle, and accessories means much more than the event itself and usually brings more pleasure than the event. Charnel was independent. She never had problems choosing a special dress and looking stunning, so Xander's actions hurt her incredibly. It seemed like a cute gesture, but given his possessive tendencies and constant jealousy attacks, it could be another way to exert control. By the end of 2017, Charnel and Xander's relationship finally fell apart. The girl first confessed to her best friend Marna that she was unhappy. The latter, who initially approved of their romance, advised breaking up with the boyfriend for good. In December, Charnel wrote on her social media page that when you give your heart to someone, don't forget to save peace for yourself. And in January, she ended the 11-month relationship with Xander. However, the young man had no intention of giving up his love. In December, he finished school, but continued calling and texting Charnel every day. Sometimes, he showed up at Stella School to talk to his girlfriend and refused to acknowledge that their romance was over. Afraid to hurt her ex-boyfriend and cause him pain, Charnel didn't block his calls, sincerely hoping that sooner or later he'd get tired of chasing her and back off on his own. Over time, she and Marna started hanging out with other friends, among whom was Brandon Victor and another rugby player. It turned out this guy had been in love with Charnel Huff for a long time, but kept his feelings secret, not wanting to interfere in her relationship with Xander. But now that the girl was free and spent a lot of time in his company, Brandon decided to confess. He was patient and ready to wait until the girl completely forgot her ex. But Charnel was cautious. She didn't want to jump into something new, so she let everything go naturally. Over time, the high school senior got used to Brandon's constant presence nearby, but as soon as Xander appeared on the horizon, her heart started beating hundreds of times faster. Nevertheless, by May 2018, Brandon and Charnel started gently holding hands and became more than just friends. They weren't ready to admit it to everyone and kept their relationship hidden from outsiders. Only Marna knew about their romance. In South African high schools, there are 4 quarters. The second quarter lasts from early April to mid-June. May 25, 2018, was an ordinary weekday, Friday, for 18-year-old Brandon, 16-year-old Marna, and 17-year-old Charnel. It was the height of the rugby season. Brandon was going with the team to Coster for a game that weekend, so he invited both girls to join them as cheerleaders. For Charnel, it was a great opportunity to visit her mom, spend time with her boyfriend, and have the weekend with her best friend. Brandon was thrilled that the girls wanted to come to his game and planned to carry out a certain plan after the match. The young man wanted to ask Charnel to officially become his girlfriend. In the afternoon of May 25th, Marna's mom was driving past Stella High School and stopped at the gates to say hello to her daughter. They chatted a bit, and the girl said she would spend the weekend in the dormitory. Then she waved goodbye and ran off. Her mom watched her growing daughter and didn't know it would be the last time she saw her girl alive. The friends had dinner that evening in their room, then had fun, jumping on beds, chasing each other, and throwing pillows, enjoying youth and freedom. Other students had gone home for the weekend. That Friday, the girls were alone in their first-floor dormitory room, and no one could disturb them from enjoying life. Their loud laughter was interrupted by a phone ring. Charnel's dad called. The man heard Marna laughing in the background. Deep down, he envied their carefree happiness and, wishing them a good time at tomorrow's game, hung up. He remembered them as joyful, content, and laughing. After talking to Dad, Charnel and Marna went to the dorm supervisor and asked the woman to wake them at 6 a.m. so they could get ready. The school bus was leaving at 6:30 from the boys' building. It was a few minutes' walk away. The girls asked Crystal, the supervisor's name, not to lock the dormitory doors at night because they wanted to take a short walk before bed. It was against the rules, but Crystal knew Marna and Charnel were responsible students, so she trusted them. The woman left the doors unlocked and went to sleep. Meanwhile, the girls hung out, drinking coffee in the common lounge. But by 11:30 p.m., they got bored and invited Brandon over to have coffee with them. Fortunately, the dormitory doors were unlocked. While the supervisors slept peacefully, the youth had fun. Charnel's mom woke up around 6 a.m. On her phone, the woman saw a message from her daughter, written at 4:17. The girl wrote how much she loved her mom, and that she was very sorry. The word sorry was misspelled. This random mistake somehow made Mom worry. Usually, Charnel wrote correctly. She couldn't misspell such a simple word. And her daughter never sent messages at 4 in the morning. The woman tried calling, but the call went to voicemail. Surely the girls partied all night and were now hurriedly getting ready for the game. Charnel's mom calmed herself, but bad thoughts wouldn't let her focus. She dialed her ex-husband's number. He assured her that their daughter was fine. They had talked the night before. When the man hung up, he saw several text messages from Charnel. The first was at 3:42 a.m. It was a photo of his daughter in a bra with the caption, "I love you, Brandon." The second message was to Dad asking to forgive them for leaving this place with Marna. The father felt his heart fill with horror. Were the girls drinking alcohol? Or how to understand this phrase about leaving this place? Had they run away from the dormitory? What was going on? Questions popped up one after another in Charnel's father's head. At 6:15 a.m., the man couldn't hold back and called the principal of Stella High School. The director exhaled and shared the news he had just learned himself. Marna and Charnel were dead. Crystal, the senior in the girls' dormitory, woke up on the morning of May 26th, shortly before 6 a.m. She got dressed and left her bedroom. The path to the girls' room passed by the common bathroom. The supervisor noticed a strange clump of dark hair on the floor, but still sleepy, didn't realize what it was. She approached the staircase between the first and second floors, and only then noticed a long green nylon rope tied to the railing. What Crystal saw next made her freeze in place. A few inches above the bicycles standing below in the stairwell dangled a pair of legs in white socks. It was the lifeless body of Charnel Huff. Crystal stood in complete shock and couldn't move. When the woman could move, she ran outside and rushed to the boys' dormitory. The building doors were open. Rugby players were hanging around everywhere, waiting for the school bus. Some were having breakfast, others packing sports gear. Crystal knocked on the boys' dormitory supervisor's door and couldn't even explain what happened. She didn't want any students to learn about the incident before police arrived. Together, the supervisors called emergency services and decided not to tell Marna about her friend's death yet. They were sure the girl was sleeping in her room, but the bedroom was empty. When Brandon boarded the bus, the girls weren't there. He asked the coach if he had seen Charnel and Marna. The man said he knew nothing, but averted his eyes. The 2-hour trip to the game turned into 100 needles piercing the enamored guy's heart. Brandon had a bad feeling. It seemed to him that his girlfriend was in the hospital and he should run to her, not go to the match. The coach, seeing the guy's state, approached and told him he couldn't share any details until they arrived in Coster. When police arrived at Stella High School, they were met by 2 adults. They explained to the officers that one of the students, Charnel Huff, had committed suicide, and her best friend Marna Engelbrecht was missing. Law enforcement officers searched the entire dormitory and found Marna in the bathroom. She was lying face down, as if she had fallen to her knees, pushing off from the sink. A long strap was wrapped around her neck, tied to one of the faucets. It looked like a bag or backpack strap. The scene was horrific, and the sergeant assumed Marna had also committed suicide. He didn't know what caused it. In any case, it was abnormal for 2 friends to decide to end their lives in one night. Most people in Stella grew up in religious families, and voluntary departure from life was considered a sin. So why did 2 young girls choose this fate? That was what needed to be figured out. First, though, the girls' parents had to be notified. It's unimaginable what wall of grief crashed down on several families at once. Their joyful daughters, who just yesterday were full of life and happy, suddenly took their own lives out of the blue. It was wrong and didn't make sense. So the parents of both students rushed to Stella School, still hoping it was some mistake. The worst was when Charnel's father appeared at the dormitory door, and his daughter was still hanging over the stairs. Police were waiting for forensic experts and wouldn't allow the body to be taken down. They wanted to rule out foul play. Marna's parents also found their daughter hanging from the strap. They immediately suspected it wasn't Marna's decision. Someone had moved the girl's body and hung it in that position. Charnel's father wasn't going to watch this. He asked his brother to cut the rope. When his daughter's lifeless body fell into his arms, his knees buckled. The man gently sat on the floor. He stroked his girl's hair and whispered something in her ear. The police watched silently. They didn't want to interfere in the father's grief, though there was a high chance he was destroying potential evidence. None of the officers could bring themselves to tell him that. A few minutes later, the man agreed that police should continue the investigation. He placed his daughter's head on sofa cushions and went outside. At that very time, Brandon was on the bus. He texted and called Charnel over and over, but the girl didn't pick up. When they arrived at the rugby field, the coach lined up all the players and told them the tragic news about the deceased high school girls. Brandon listened to the horrible words and didn't understand what the coach was talking about. What does unnatural death mean? That evening, the young man was going to ask Charnel to be his girlfriend. He had been waiting for this moment for months, and now she had died an unnatural death. Everything seemed unreal. At that moment, Brandon didn't know the friends had committed suicide. Otherwise, he would have immediately said it couldn't be. Just 6 hours earlier, he was hanging out with the girls, and everything was fine. They weren't planning to leave this world. So first thing, Brandon called Charnel's father and told him how he and the girls spent the previous evening. The young man, at the friend's invitation, came to visit from the boys' dormitory. Everything was good. They held hands, danced to music, and chatted nicely until Charnel's phone started blowing up with calls and texts. Her ex-boyfriend, Xander, desperately wanted to meet her. The group tried hard to ignore it, but the calls didn't stop. At midnight, Charnel picked up, putting the conversation on speaker. Xander's first words were about who she was with now. Not wanting unnecessary arguments, the high school senior said she was alone, but had no intention of meeting him. The guy started inventing reasons to see her. Charnel was firm. Before hanging up, Xander said she would regret her words and reckless actions. At that moment, the good mood vanished instantly. The girl remembered how her ex had previously threatened to kill himself if she broke up with him. Those threats always depressed her because she wished Xander no harm. She always tried to calm the guy, but now she realized it was just manipulation. Brandon offered to stay with the girls in the room or go wake the supervisor. But Charnel assured him everything would be fine and sent him to bed. The young man reluctantly left, as he had an important game in a few hours. Charnel's father thanked the young man for the detailed story. He liked this guy. At the same time, Brandon was the last to see his daughter alive, and who guarantees he was telling the truth now? The man didn't know what to believe. Finally, forensic investigators arrived at the scene and began collecting physical evidence. It was a clump of dark hair on the bathroom floor, Charnel and Marna's cell phones, the rope and bag strap on which the victims were hung. Forensics took fingerprints from various surfaces, and detectives interviewed Crystal, the girls' dormitory supervisor. When police learned the building's entrance doors were not locked at night, and the boys' dormitory too, the suspect pool expanded significantly. Essentially, it could be anyone: a rugby player, a random stranger, or someone from the girls' close circle. As soon as the school principal learned about the unlocked dormitory doors, he panicked. The victims' parents could easily sue the school for negligence in student safety, so the principal hired a private detective to resolve the matter quickly. Christopher Saunders was brought in for the investigation. His main task was to prove that Stella School bore no responsibility for this tragedy. The girls' parents weren't quick to leave. Together, they tried to figure out what could have happened. After Charnel's father told about Brandon's call, Marna's father recalled a conversation with his daughter in March of the same year. The girl complained to her father that her third cousin Xander was insulting her, considering her the main culprit in his breakup with Charnel. The man called his relative and for the first time faced disrespect from Xander. The guy yelled that no one would tell him how to behave, and if they didn't leave him alone, he'd solve the problem with a gun. Then he hung up. Marna's father initially thought it was teenage drama. He didn't take the kids' threats seriously, so he just asked the girls to stay away from this person and not provoke him on purpose. Soon, everything quieted down. But now his daughter's words resurfaced in memory, and the father couldn't forgive himself for not resolving the issue completely. He worried. What if Xander carried out his threats? The man couldn't stand it. He couldn't just stand there guessing what happened to Marna, so he got in the family car and headed toward Xander's father's house, intending to confront the guy and even shoot him if necessary. Since the young man finished school, he lived on the farm and worked for his father. Private Detective Saunders examined the crime scene and talked to the deceased girl's parents. They told him about the strange text messages Charnel sent at night. The mention of Brandon's name in one of them made one think. None of the parents believed their daughters committed suicide. Most considered Xander the criminal, but they also confirmed Brandon was the last to see the girls alive. When Saunders learned Marna's father was heading to Xander with a weapon, the detective immediately followed to prevent vigilante justice. The upset man could do something he'd regret later. Just in case, the detective turned on his recorder. He always recorded conversations to listen again later and catch what he missed the first time. Arriving at the farm, Saunders immediately saw Xander lying near the house wall. Marna's father was waving a gun and yelling something, and another man was apparently protecting his son. Saunders' primary task was to prevent bloodshed, so he quickly cooled the girl's father's ardor, saying he was a law enforcement officer and would do everything to solve the case. Then the private detective asked Xander to come with him to the police station to answer a few questions. The guy's father didn't lie and told Saunders he had no alibi for his son. He saw Xander leave at 6:30 p.m. Friday evening and return to the farm at 6 a.m. Saturday. The detective advised the man to find a good lawyer in that case. The private detective immediately noticed the guy looked sleepy and sluggish, as if under the influence of some drugs, so he didn't take the chance to talk him into opening up. Xander explained his condition as shock from what happened to Charnel and Marna. That morning, a relative called and told him his ex-girlfriend and third cousin had taken their own lives. Charnel Huff was his only love, and the young man couldn't come to terms with her sudden departure so easily. Saunders tried psychological tactics to make the guy talk if he was indeed guilty of something, but he answered no to all questions. According to his version, Friday evening, he felt lonely. He felt isolated, so he went to visit a friend. After a couple of hours there, he bought more beer, drove to a vacant lot, and drank alone, then showed up at his mother's work early in the morning. Xander fell silent, then told Saunders he actually didn't remember if he went to the dormitory that night because he was pretty drunk. Then his story changed and gained details. Now he claimed he was definitely at Stella High School to reconcile with Charnel. He came to the dormitory after Brandon left, so after 1 a.m., he and the girl sat on the stairs and talked. Charnel allegedly confessed she still loved Xander, but because everyone considered their relationship toxic and insisted on breaking up, she couldn't stand up to her parents and best friend. Practically admitting he saw the girls alive after Brandon left, Xander still denied any involvement in their deaths. Then Saunders used another method. He told the guy in detail how the girls died, then convinced him he'd need a good lawyer, but he'd have to tell the lawyer the whole truth, whatever it was. And then the guy broke. He started saying he wanted the death penalty, so he'd tell everything asked. He couldn't live in this world without Charnel. Then Xander changed his story again. He admitted he was very angry at Marna, who interfered in their relationship and ruined everything. When Charnel went to throw on something warmer, He saw Marna go into the bathroom. The girl was washing her hands when he approached from behind, grabbed her hair, hit her, then wrapped the bag strap around her neck and tightened it, then attached the strap to the faucet, so it looked like Marna took her own life. At that moment, Xander thought he solved the problem. But when Charnel returned from the bedroom, it was like she was replaced. She said she was now dating Brandon, and he should forget about everything. That's when the guy hit the girl in the chest and grabbed her throat. While she was unconscious, he wrapped the rope around her neck, dragged her to the railing, and threw the body over. The words sounded pretty harsh for an enamored teenager. Then he started saying Charnel wanted to die herself. The girl accidentally sent her dad a photo meant for Brandon, and now she was very ashamed. Plus, she couldn't be with Xander and was too upset to stay on Earth. Essentially, Xander had just confessed to the crime. But remember, Saunders obtained this confession using a special method, and it gave no guarantee the person was telling the truth. The guy just answered yes or no when the private detective asked leading questions. The car pulled up to the police station, and Detective Saunders was glad he managed to record their entire conversation with Xander on the recorder. It wasn't an official interrogation, but it could surely serve as a good starting point for the investigation. The private investigator handed the young man over to other officers. The guy's parents had arrived at the station by then. Police and Xander refused a lawyer and made an official confession. According to him, Charnel no longer wanted to be on Earth and cause pain to others. She asked him to help her end it. They agreed Xander would come up with a way for her not to feel pain. The young man tied the rope to the stairs while Charnel was still alive, then rendered the girl unconscious and lowered the body down. So she left without suffering, as planned. According to Xander, after that, he saw Marna heading to the bathroom. The guy quickly scanned the lobby and noticed someone's bag with a long strap. He used it as a weapon, strangling his third cousin. He didn't even remember if there was any conversation between them or if he attacked immediately. Xander changed his narrative yet again, only he didn't account for Marna having to pass the stairs and not notice her friend hanging on the railing. Most likely, the guy was lying, but it didn't matter because he was immediately arrested on 2 counts of intentional murder of the schoolgirls. Detective Saunders continued working for his fee and began interrogating witnesses. First, he was interested in Brandon. He needed to confirm his alibi and rule the young man out as a suspect. The detective asked the young man for his cell phone to check the timeline via text messages. Brandon had no problem cooperating. There was nothing unusual in his correspondence with Charnel. The guy respected her boundaries and cared for her safety. On May 26th at 1 a.m., the lovers sent each other their last messages. Brandon asked if everything was okay and offered to return to the 2 friends' room to act as a personal bodyguard. He also suggested the girls spend the night in the boys' dormitory to avoid meeting Xander. In response, Charnel said it was a bad idea and they could get in trouble because of it. The girl wished Brandon good night and assured him everything would be fine with her. According to cell phone location records, Brandon didn't leave his room after that until 6 in the morning, or he went out without his phone. Saunders heard Brandon's alibi again and learned about Xander's late phone call. The detective managed to view the call log on Charnel's phone. There were about a dozen missed calls from her ex-boyfriend, and she answered only 1 call. The story matched what Brandon said. The young man also told police that in the months before the crime, Xander periodically showed up at Stella High School. Charnel didn't want to see him, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. The forensic pathologist performed autopsies on the deceased girls. Marna had several injuries. A clump of her hair was torn out, as evidenced by the dark strand on the floor near the bathroom doors. Her jaw was also broken. This didn't support the voluntary suicide version. Marna's cause of death was strangulation with the bag strap, but it didn't match the hanging as the criminal wanted to stage it. It was clear third-party interference. Simply put, the girls were helped to the next world, and the strap was tied to the faucet after the fact. Apparently, the schoolgirl left the room and noticed her friend hanging on the railing. It's also possible Marna attacked the perpetrator herself. For friendship, this petite girl was capable of such an act. As for Charnel, she had a blunt force injury to the chest. Most likely, the attacker hit her, then tried to squeeze her throat. The high school senior had two types of strangulation marks on her neck. The first matched human hand sizes, the second, the rope's width. The most horrible thing was that Charnel most likely regained consciousness when the body was thrown over the railing. At that moment, she fought for her life. Her nails on both hands were completely broken and her neck was scratched bloody. Charnel wanted to tear off the noose but failed. She didn't take her own life either. Both girls' deaths occurred approximately between 2 and 4 in the morning. So who could send strange messages to their parents at 4:17 a.m.? When Detective Saunders listened to the recording again, he was convinced once more that Xander couldn't know Marna was hit in the face and Charnel in the chest unless he was at the scene that day. So the criminal was behind bars. Now it was just a matter of gathering enough evidence to prevent his release. In search of additional information, police interviewed local residents. A witness came forward who saw Xander's car near the girls' dormitory Friday evening. And besides Marna and Charnel, there were no other students there. All the schoolgirls living in the dormitory at that time were offered to talk to a psychologist. However, it did little to help the fact that in the common rooms where they spent so much time, 2 of their classmates were killed. The students walked the stairs and used the bathroom knowing that not long ago, the lifeless bodies of their peers were there. It was a heavy trial and seriously affected the emotional state of teenagers not used to seeing death so close. Who is Xander Bailsma? What could drive a handsome guy to commit a crime? Wild jealousy or revenge against an ex-girlfriend? Xander was born on May 13, 1999, to Marcia and Monty. The parents spent years trying to have a child. And when the miracle happened, Marcia got pregnant with a son, but in the first months, she contracted rubella. This disease can affect an unborn baby, leaving irreversible consequences. That's why doctors recommended terminating the pregnancy. However, the woman couldn't refuse the one she had waited for so long. Xander was born small and sickly, but eventually fully recovered and became a normal child. Marcia considered him a gift from heaven and was ready to do anything for him. Locals knew Xander was a mama's boy. When the parents divorced, it was very hard for the son to cope. He became a troublemaker at home and started behaving inadequately at school. He was taken to a mental health specialist to talk about his feelings and experiences. Xander refused to speak at all. His behavioral problems worsened with age. He bullied female classmates and was suspended from classes in Stella several times for fighting, drinking alcohol, and even sneaking into the girls' dormitory room. Because of this, he finished school a year late. There were not very good rumors about Xander, and many Stella residents thought the parents should have punished the guy more often so they wouldn't suffer from his behavior now. The young man's favorite activity was hunting wild animals. Local farmers even paid him extra to shoot jackals that attacked their livestock. Xander loved hunting and loved weapons. The passion for taking innocent lives turned into intentional murder of people when the line between good and evil was erased. What else can you expect from such a person? Investigators talked to the families and friends of the deceased. All of them were against Charnel dating Xander, although at first, he seemed like a good, polite boy to them. But his reputation and behavior spoke of real problems in his head. Charnel, on the other hand, was used to giving people a chance to show their best side. Unfortunately, the young man didn't want to take it. It got to the point where he wouldn't let his girlfriend post photos on social media, forbade makeup, and tried to fatten her up with sweets so she gained weight and stopped appealing to others. Xander insisted Charnel quit sports. His goal was to lower her self-esteem, so the schoolgirl relied only on him in everything. If control slackened, he could easily use physical force. Charnel deliberately delayed until December. She was waiting for Xander to finish school and stop stalking her. In early 2018, she ended the relationship. The high school senior didn't think her ex was capable of radical measures. That was her mistake. In June 2018, the girls were buried next to each other. Hundreds of people came to honor their memory. Blue, pink, and purple balloons were released into the sky. This tradition symbolizes release from grief and allows souls to ascend to the heavens to become free. Charnel's father told journalists that his daughter was the meaning of his life. Now that she was gone, nothing held him to this earth either. But first, he would achieve justice for his girl. All loved ones believed the tragic death of the two friends was Xander's doing. However, the general public didn't think so. Private Detective Saunders didn't publicize the guy's initial confession, and the evidence against him was only circumstantial. Even DNA analysis yielded no specific results. All evidence at that point was unconvincing. The outcome of Xander's detention was that no charges were filed against him. He completely recanted his confessions, claiming he wasn't even near Stella School that night. The young man accused Marna's father and Saunders of intimidating him. The guy's family also hired a lawyer, but it's hard to defend someone who invents new stories every time. By blaming the private detective, Xander essentially dug his own grave. He didn't know the investigator had a recording of their car conversation and was ready to present it in court. The messages sent from Charnel's phone after her death could also play a decisive role. If the perpetrator, presumably Xander, sent both friends to the next world and then sat next to their bodies for half an hour, thinking how to cover his tracks, it wasn't a crime of passion. He sent an explicit photo of the girl in a bra to her father to paint her in a bad light, but in the end, gave detectives a lead to unravel the whole case. The young man had more than one lawyer replaced. His father even had to sell the farm to pay for the hired defenders, but the young man himself cared little. While awaiting trial, Xander was detained and placed in custody. The guy must have had winds blowing in his head when he wrote a letter to his mother asking her to find a corrupt judge to release him on bail, and even specified a country to flee to until people forgot about him. Xander threatened that if Mom didn't help him get out of prison, he'd kill himself. The son demanded the woman think about him for once in her life and help. Apparently, the young man somehow forgot what his parents did for him. He sent this message not knowing that letters from inmates are checked. At the hearings, a psychiatrist showed the defendant had paranoid personality disorder. Xander was depressive and impulsive, a recluse. He thought everyone was stupid and easy to manipulate. He behaved so arrogantly that the next lawyer refused to defend him right in the courtroom. Charnel and Marna's parents waited over a year for Xander's trial to begin. Then the hearings were postponed another year, to May 2019. By then, prosecutors had gathered enough evidence to charge the young man with the murder of his ex-girlfriend and her best friend. First, Xander knew exact details about the girl's injuries before the autopsy was done. Only the person who inflicted the blows could know that. These confessions were on Private Detective Saunders' recorder tapes. Second, a random witness saw the guy's car at the girl's dormitory, and cell towers recorded Xander's phone location on Stella High School grounds. Third, the prosecution presented another witness. It was a girl named Anastasia Visor, who attended another high school but knew Xander well. The young people messaged occasionally, but since they lived far apart, their communication didn't grow into something serious, though flirting was definitely there. When Charnel broke up with Xander, the young man started writing to Anastasia more often and for months just complained about his ex's treachery. On Thursday, May 24th, Anastasia was watching TV when her phone rang. It was Xander, and he was definitely enraged. The young man learned Charnel started dating Brandon, and he couldn't accept it. He yelled on the phone that if he saw his ex again, he wouldn't control his anger. Xander threatened to ruin Charnel's life and drive her to suicide. The guy also said he'd find explicit photos on his ex's phone and send them to her father to show how shameless his daughter was. Anastasia tried to sort out the situation. She understood Xander was driven mad by the news of his ex's new romance, and she didn't like being in the middle of someone else's relationship. She didn't take the young man's words seriously, so she told no one about the call. But 2 days later, when she saw the news about the tragedy at Stella's school dormitory, Anastasia felt guilty and told her parents about Xander's call. Mom and Dad convinced their daughter to go to police and repeat what she told them. After the girl's testimony, the message saying, "I love you, Brandon," sent from Charnel's phone to her father made sense. Thus, the sender not only undermined the girl's reputation with her parents, but also cast suspicion on Brandon. At the same time, it gave a clear motive for the attack. Xander Bailsma asked to speak and gave testimony on his own behalf. This time, he had a completely new story about that night when Stella's school lost 2 students. This time, the young man said he didn't enter the dormitory, but talked to Charnel in the car. The girl called Brandon just a cover, so relatives and friends wouldn't lecture her about Xander. They had a long talk, after which the guy left. It was long before 3 a.m. Now, the young man tried in every way to shift suspicion to Brandon, thereby convincing the judge and jury of his own innocence. Xander didn't know Brandon heard their entire phone conversation with Charnel and knew about his threats. As usual, such people think they're smarter than everyone around. They believe all bad deeds will easily go unpunished. When prosecutors asked Xander why he changed his story so many times, the young man blamed it on countless lawyers, each forcing him to say different things. At the moment, Xander had no alibi, no convincing account of that night's events, but he did have a ticket to places not so remote. On February 17th, 2020, the judge called Xander a liar and manipulator who heartlessly took the life of his third cousin Marna while she innocently washed her hands, then strangled his ex-girlfriend. His actions were deemed premeditated, motivated by jealousy and anger over Charnel's new relationship. Xander decided that since she neglected him, she didn't deserve happiness either. Though it was Xander's first criminal offense, and he was found guilty of double murder of high school girls, the girls' parents could finally breathe. But due to the pandemic, they had to wait until August for the verdict. The judge sentenced Xander to 2 life terms. The convicted guy's parents were outraged. They rushed to hug their son because they still believed in his innocence. Then Xander's father lunged with fists at one of the investigators. The man blamed having to sell the family farm and spend a ton of money not on his own son, but on those who framed him as a criminal. Marcia, the mom, insisted to the end that her son was a tender, sensitive boy incapable of horrible acts. Xander tried to appeal the sentence, but failed. He changed lawyers again, but it didn't help him get free. Despite the fact that the criminal who destroyed 2 young souls will rot behind bars, it won't bring the girls back. Charnel and Marna had their whole lives ahead, cruelly cut short by Xander. They will never marry, have children, or build careers. Charnel will never become a successful photographer, and hundreds of animals will never receive Marna's care. And the blame lies with the person who decided his hurt ego was worth more than the lives of these wonderful girls. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.